Ba-ba-dee-ba-ba, ba-ba-dee-ba.
Ba-da-da-ba-ba. Welcome to the show. Hi, I'm Nate,
I'm Noah.
and this is a show called Talking Lion. Welcome to chat number 11. We actually haven't done one of these in a while.
It has been a minute, hasn't it?
Because, we've had the releases, and so I really like doing those behind the scenes, but they're definitely not the same. You know, it's a whole different energy, you know? This is freeform. Who knows?
It's just two guys in a room.
Just two guys in a room. You've never heard that on a podcast.
Never heard that on a podcast before. Oh, no.
Man. No, I we got some stuff to talk about. You know, we got things we've seen, things we've heard, things we're working on, interesting stuff. But I definitely want to quickly plug before we start up that we have a Patreon. So if you guys want to ask us questions, feel free to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/talkinglion. That helps keep everything going and also lets you be a part of this show. Every little piece helps. And also anything that we don't need or use for the show, we give back because we don't need it. We don't want it. We want to help the world because the world sucks.
The world needs help.
World needs help. And there's things that can be done. So, you know, I feel like we say it every show, but do what you can to make the world better because literally every piece counts at this point. Because if you're not part of the solution, you're very much a part of the problem, I think. Well, I think that's a good enough intro. Would you say that's an intro?
That's an intro.
Wait till you guys hear the outro.
Oh, man.
Oh, man. So,
Without further ado.
this is Talking Lion.
Wow.
So before we dive into the questions, you know, I just kind of wanted to catch up.
Yeah.
You know, I
Long
feel
time
like,
no see.
right?
You've been in your room for the last 45 minutes.
Yeah. You know, I was working on the other chat number 10. You know,
Right.
It's exporting as we speak. Actually, I always have fun with those behind the scenes. As I said in the intro, they're fun to kind of like piece the threads of like working on a song.
Yeah.
Because it makes you really think about how a song comes to exist. Speaking of songs, we had a drive today.
Oh, yeah.
And I almost hit a Mercedes, and I wrote a song about that. It's 4 lines. I'm going to drop it in right now. I don't want to hit a Mercedes. Fine with hitting any other cheaper car. I don't want to hit a Mercedes because the price of it is way too hard to pay. Did you like it?
Oh, I loved it.
Thank you, man.
It's the writing is inspired. It's really the part that really gets me is the cheaper car.
Yeah.
that's really the detail that pushes it over the edge for me.
I'm okay with, like, not that I want to hit any car, but if I'm going to hit a car, I'd like
It's got to be
one,
cheaper than a Mercedes.
Pretty inexpensive, yeah.
You want to know a fun fact about Mercedeses?
Yes.
So Mercedes are
Wait, is that the plural of Mercedes?
I think it's Mercedes.
Yeah.
The Mercedes Benz is a really popular and really like common car in Zimbabwe.
Oh.
It was a car, kind of the car that everyone had. Like the Mercedes Benz was to Zimbabwe 10, 15 years ago as the Toyota Camry is to like any major American city now.
Footnote, you grew up in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
There
For
we go.
those who don't know. My parents actually had this particular Mercedes that was our car for a really long time that used to belong to the ambassador or like some kind of foreign service member. So it had tinted bulletproof windows that I always thought was really cool.
Just in case anybody shot it.
Just in case any
5-year-old Noah.
Yeah. I mean, you know,
You never know.
we had armed guards at our house. Like guns were a part of the life.
Whoa.
People definitely got shot at. We were the only people that I knew. Like all of my friends had their homes broken into, like with armed people, like armed robbers. We got lucky. A couple times people tried to break in, but the alarms went off and the guards stopped them. And like, that's the kind of stuff you had to deal with.
You know, I feel like I like knew this all tangentially, but it is something to hear it all placed out. Just
I don't
because,
think a ton about it either because it's just how I grew up. My childhood was all guns and snakes.
That's a Hamilton song, isn't it?
Guns and snakes. Davy Dix does that one, right?
Yeah, right? Speaking of Hamilton
Okay.
and heroes,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Like American heroes.
American heroes.
Quote unquote.
Where are you going
Because they're
with this?
complicated.
Yeah.
Guitar Hero.
Guitar
I wanna
Hero.
talk to you about
Okay,
Guitar
that's
Hero.
quite the segue. I like
We were
it.
thinking about Guitar Hero this week. We
Yeah.
were talking about it and how interesting it is that for this one kind of moment in 2000s music history, there was a significant push on specific rock songs that had nothing to do, quote unquote, nothing to do with labels.
Yeah.
You know, if you think about how mainstream music is so controlled by radios and labels and how that whole machine works, all of a sudden you had a level of A&Ring being done by a video game company.
Yeah, which is really weird to think about. I don't think we have anything analogous to that now, do we?
It is just interesting to me how many people we know and how many songwriters have named their influences as bands that they found from Guitar Hero.
Yeah.
Like that's a really interesting thing to me.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. It's kind of a generational thing too, that like for people our age, like Guitar Hero was like at the zenith of its popularity, like right when we were like teenagers, basically. Right. It was a
Guitar Hero at bar mitzvahs.
Yeah, you had Guitar Hero at parties. Like that was, you had like the viral videos of those kids just shredding through the fire and flames. It was like a cultural moment. And like all of those songs, like obviously a lot of the songs that will go into Guitar Hero were like already popular. Like a song like Sweet Child of Mine or something.
Right.
Like anything like that is like.
But wasn't necessarily popular in 2005 or 6.
Yeah, exactly. It brought this particular aesthetic of like rock music to its own. And we talk about this, I feel like, quite often, just because of how formative, like Rock Band is kind of one of the reasons I got into music. Like the video game Rock Band is one of the reasons I got into music, because I was at a video game camp because I really wanted to pursue a career in video games, and I played a bunch of Rock Band, and like for some reason really connected with Carry On My Wayward Son and Down with the Sickness. Those were the two songs in that.
Those are two I would love to hear that mashup though.
Honestly, yeah. And like that was part of what pushed me down, like getting really into playing the video game Rock Band was part of what pushed me into like wanting to play music more seriously than just like a hobby. I think they're incredibly important video games, and like they're also an interesting time capsule of like the curation that went into them.
But yeah, I mean, that was the thing. It was like you would have like Paramore alongside, you know, Guns N' Roses alongside AFI.
Yeah.
Which is just a crazy kind of combo. You get what I'm saying? Like, like songs that you wouldn't necessarily be hearing on the radio at the time too. So it was just, definitely an interesting thing. Well, we have a question from our Patreon subscriber, Alan C.
Oh, lovely.
Thank you so much, Alan, for being a part of this show. And if you want to be a part of this show, fair listener, just check out our Patreon. But his question, which I love keeping a secret from you, that's my favorite part.
You get to see the shock on my face.
In your face. Right. But the question, I think it's a good one, is what was the most difficult conflict either one or both of you have had to dealt with in your careers?
Ooh.
Right?
That is a good question.
Now, I would posit that this is somewhat of an individual question, because I feel like the conflicts you and I have had have always been somewhat more like personally based. I don't think we've ever had have we ever had a dispute about like a credit or like a money or like?
No, I feel like we've broadly been able to stay on the same page about like career stuff. I think that's part of like what's kept us going.
Although I think one comes to mind as far as you and I go, and then we can go individual as CTFO.
Oh yeah, that is interesting.
There's a song you wrote individually that like I really loved and wanted to like bring into the SL world. And
I was hesitant to, because it represented a space that I was trying to carve out for myself. I think maybe that's, I don't know if that's like the most challenging thing, but maybe that's what I'll talk about. I think that like one of the things that I've probably struggled with the most is finding the lines in the compartments of like, what is my own voice in a vacuum, and how does that filter into like what is Sleeping Lion, and like what is the work that I do with Sleeping Lion for other people, and what's the work that I do for myself for other people. I think like the struggle, it's kind of an ongoing struggle of like, you know, drawing boundaries, because it filters, it's a very nebulous thing when it comes to creativity. But I think that we've both kind of found that you need to draw some kind of boundaries around your creativity, or else it all gets too overwhelming. I think especially when you're the kind of creative like we are, who our creativity isn't just limited to one medium. We make like, you know, visual art and poetry and, you know, screenwriting and all that kind of stuff. I think it's important to like have designated outlets. And I think that I really struggled for a long time with like, what do I as Noah Maguire have to say versus what do I as Noah Maguire in Sleeping Lion have to say? Now I feel like I have a much better handle on all of it, but I think it took me years of like questioning and like banging my head against a wall and like, you know, staring at the blank piece of paper, like trying to find my voice as a writer, and like, you know, learning how to be a better collaborator with you, and all kinds of stuff like that to come out the other end of it.
And I feel like because like that song was one of the first songs you sort of wrote outside of this like Sleeping Lion, I guess, experience or whatever.
Right.
You were sort of like, you kind of held it precious and held it sacred. And I was kind of like coming down on that. Whereas, now you've got this project, this Music for Bird project. There's so many songs you've been able to write by yourself that we've actually been able to revisit that song and potentially think about pitching it or think about like doing anything kind of.
Yeah. I've gotten to a place where like it doesn't, where I have my designated thing that I get to be precious about, so that literally everything else I get to approach with a more sober head.
Well, and on the other side of that, I think my like kind of need to bring you in on everything or be a part of everything came from an insecurity. Like I think that I've always felt that you're like a better musician. I do other stuff or whatever, but I always thought that you were a better musician. So I'm like, okay, well, on the one hand, I'm like, if he's going to do a solo project, it's going to be great. And he's not going to want to do music with me anymore or whatever. Like it came from definitely a very false insecurity.
Yeah.
I think the other part of it too was that I wasn't recognizing how I take up as much space as I'm given.
Yeah.
And
I give a lot of space.
Yeah. And I wasn't realizing until we actually had conversations and like worked through it that like I have a responsibility to myself if I want Sleeping Lion to be a duo project and not like you're producing me, to make sure there's room, to make sure that there's, and I think we've done a really great job of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, also I realized that whereas maybe I'm insecure still about like music, I feel a lot more confident in the other things. Like I think I felt less insecure about like you doing Music for Birds as like the podcast became something that I really enjoyed, or as I started doing more film work with people, or even, started working with Max on my own stuff or getting into poetry, because I thought, okay, if I don't do Sleeping Lion, then nobody's gonna give a fuck about anything that I do ever, period, and I suck. But it's like, oh no, there's other stuff that we both do that can exist and coexist with like what we're up to. So that's an interesting one.
Yeah, I think that's a meaningful one.
That's a meaningful one. Mine is like there's that shitty manager that I won't name, but we know, and he made me work on Yom Kippur, and that pissed me off so much.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, almost everybody I've met in the music industry has just been absolutely lovely, but this guy was an absolute piece of shit. And I'm glad that all of his clients who were friends of ours are no longer with him because they recognized that he was ruining their reputation. But yeah, definitely not a fan of this guy. And that was probably one of the bigger conflicts I've had.
Yeah. Yeah, I think our music industry experience hasn't been very conflict laden.
No, it's been actually really lovely, I'd say, which I'm super grateful for.
Yeah, definitely.
This guy's the only person that we were like, we have lawyers, like don't do this,
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you, Alan C, for your question. That was a good one. You really got us thinking.
Yeah,
you got us kind of in our feelings a little bit.
Yeah, that was a really good question.
I see it on your face. No,
the shock and awe.
The shock and awe. Well, it's always just nice to like grow up a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like you don't realize how much you've kind of grown and changed until you can look back on the conflicts that you've had.
Yeah. And have them feel kind of small.
Have them feel kind of small.
That's like one of the most amazing feelings, I think.
Which leads me to a new segment that I want to introduce before we get to the questions.
Yes.
I was going to do it at the end, but I feel like the segue is almost too good to let go.
Okay.
The new segment is called, Can I Ask You a Personal Question?
I love that.
And because we've been friends and roommates for 5 or 6 years, there's a lot we know about each other.
Yeah.
But I feel like like anybody, there are just things that we don't know. And I wanted to like try to ask you a question and have you ask me a question that we just don't actually know the answer to.
Okay.
That like has never come up just sort of casually in conversation. So my question, and it ties into what we were talking about, is do you remember something that happened as a kid that felt huge at the time?
Ooh.
Like mortifyingly terrible at the time. Or just embarrassing or whatever. But in retrospect was like so small.
Ooh. This is just the first thing that comes to mind. I had in the fourth grade, I had a crush on this girl. It was my first crush ever. She was in the 5th grade, and she was dating this guy whose mom was like a frenemy of my mother's. Like they sort of were like close, but like had like low key beef. And I had just like the biggest, dumbest puppy dog crush on this girl, even despite knowing literally nothing about her. And I guess through general elementary school gossip, word got around that I had a huge crush on this girl, and I was at her 5th grade boyfriend's birthday party. And he pulls me aside and he's just like, listen, man, I know something that you don't want me to know.
Whoa.
And I'm like, whoa. He
came for you.
He came for me. And then he said like, it was very like kind of Italian mobster. Like, I know something you don't want me to know. He talked around it. He's like, listen, man, at least you got good taste in ladies. And then he walked away. And that, for whatever
that's an
reason,
extreme sentence specifically because you guys are 12.
Yeah, no, literally, this is in 5th grade.
But I feel like ladies is a strong word.
I don't know if that's precisely the word he used, but that was 100% the sentiment. Maybe I'm embellishing a little bit, but that has stayed with me because it shook me. There was something weirdly terrifying about it, even though there were no consequences at the end of the day. You just wanted to like.
He ruined your whole day.
He ruined the whole evening.
And mind you, like the bar seems like it was pretty low considering you were at your crush's boyfriend's party.
Right, exactly.
Which that's a whole nother thing to unpack. Yeah.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Yes.
Okay. So it is well documented. I don't know actually how well documented it is that I have a terrible fear of fish that is less a fear of fish specifically and more a fear of being swallowed alive or some kind of thing. It's a very nebulous fear. I still have to unpack it properly in therapy. I just haven't. I've had other things.
Your therapist is like, "Are you ready for fish?" And you're like, "No." It's like, cool, no,
literally. Yeah, it's like literally.
That'll be $500.
It'll be $500 to talk about fish. This is just one of the first things that came to mind when you gave me this prompt. I know you had a fear of transformation as a youngin, but do you currently now as a person have like a primal, like some people are scared of snakes, some people are scared. Do you have like a thing or like drowning or heights, or do you have something that like just really gives you the willies? Like it's like totally primal, like just your brain just like freaks out when you see it or think about it.
Yeah. Definitely. There were like all these like sort of small things that's like kind of popped into my head. I'm a generally terrified person.
Right.
Like I think people don't really know that about me, but like because I overthink everything, I see the worst case scenarios all the time, and that's I think why I'm at peace all the time. It's like that's my secret cap. I'm always scared.
Right.
Like,
but I'm talking less about anxiety and more like fear, like fear factor, like you're like spiders on your face, like. So baseline human fear. And
you, I guess you sort of know this, but I don't think you necessarily know the extent. I can't look at mirrors for too long.
Oh,
that's like my big thing.
Interesting.
I have like really distinct memories, and this was God, this is a little embarrassing. I couldn't risk in my own head taking showers in my house, like back in New York when I was a kid, if there wasn't somebody in the house. Mm. And the reason is because if I looked at a mirror for too long, I would start unraveling. I would just start like, oh my God, that's me, and I am him, and he is I, and we are all together.
Right.
And I can die at any moment, and when I die, I forget. But also, like, I don't even know if I'm alive. Like, I completely existentially break down, and I'm like, I'm in a video game, and I'm also dead, and I'm also like, I have such a hard time. Like I'm somebody on LSD looking at themselves in the mirror.
I was about to say that sounds like someone on LSD looking in a mirror.
But like as a sober regular person.
Right.
And the thing is that I had a ton of mirrors in my bathroom in New York. So if I looked in the mirror while I was like getting, the temperature right on the shower, if I looked in the mirror for too long, I'd be in the shower for maybe 15 seconds before completely breaking down. And I would have to like grab a towel, run out of the bathroom. And luckily nobody in my family like ever saw this. They just heard it. I would run out of my room and call my brother's name or call my mom's name or call my dad. And I'd be like, Dad. And he'd be like, yeah. I'd be like crazy weather we're having. And he's like, yeah, I suppose you'd say it was raining out. That's what I would say. And like just having a normal conversation would sort of reboot me
acknowledging that there's another person as well.
Like rebooting the human experience.
Right.
Like it doesn't quell the like I think I have these thoughts pretty much all the time, but it just at least put me back into the sort of driver's seat of this is all I know and I'm okay with that.
Right.
As opposed to this is all I know and there's so much that I don't know.
Right.
I'm gonna unravel. So I mean, even thinking about this, like, isn't he but that's why, like, every time we've moved somewhere, like, if there's a room that has a mirror in it, I've asked you to take it.
Right.
Like, our first place in in LA.
Yeah, it was
had a
big mirror wall
that you broke.
that I did break. I hate those things. Those sliding mirrors with that are attached at the top and the bottom. It's if you break it and you try to fix it, it just makes them worse. I mean, ours in the hallway is also broken.
But yeah, I pretty specifically like don't fuck.
They still give you the willies.
They still give me the willies. They really freak me out, and I feel a lot more safe in this house because I live with other people.
Right.
But yeah, I still have like a pretty weird reaction, except for when I drink. For some reason, when I'm drunk, I can look myself in the mirror and be like, "You fucking rock."
That's really interesting.
I'm like, you look pretty good, my guy. Like. Anyway, that's a great. Do you like this segment? Do you like?
I like it a lot.
Cool. All right. I hope everybody likes this segment because I feel like the challenges weren't really doing it in this time. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like there's too much going on, too much we're working on, too many factors to like challenge each other. I feel like we're already being challenged by the experience.
Challenge is getting out of bed in the morning.
But I feel like an opportunity to get to know each other better with stories that have no context. Like when would I talk about like a mirror?
No, it's good podcast content.
Yeah. Also, yeah, now people know you're like terrified of fish, which is I still think a wild.
It's on my dating profiles.
That's so funny. Wait, how do you like present it?
It was
Loves coffee, movies.
no, it's not even like that. It's like you know how on Hinge there's like prompts and one of them is like a phobia, and I was like that's a cute one because I could be like I'm terrified of fish, but it's not really like fish. It's more like my answer is a kind of run on like that. That's like sort of like tongue in cheek. But that's something that people have now. I'm just talking about dating. Yikes! But that's something that people have specifically commented on a lot. Like I get a lot of messages very specifically about the fish fear on dating apps.
Well, I've noticed that like whenever you had to do the online dating thing, you've always been pretty good at it. I feel like I'm terrible at it because my profile is like, I like movies, I like coffee.
It's hard.
Like
it's
nobody's
hard.
like, I don't think I have anything that anybody can sort of grab onto. I think we should create a dating app specifically for emotionally chaotic people and call it Unhinged.
Ooh, I like that. That's great. That's funny.
I promise I was completely off the dome.
No, that's great.
Hey, I say we dive into our questions.
Yeah.
Is that,
Yeah.
So what's something new you're listening to?
What is something new I'm listening to? Oh yeah. I got one just a little snack of a song. There's the new Anderson .Paak song is fun.
Oh, cool.
Which it's also a protest song. It's called Lockdown. It's about COVID and it's about the sort of racial reckoning that's happening in the country. The lyrics are like really intricate and politically charged and like really like sharp and socially conscious. But it's Anderson .Paak, so it's just it's a fun, funky record. And I think there's something so refreshing and like even, and we'll probably talk about this, like, you know, something that struck me about watching Da 5 Bloods was like how heavily they feature Marvin Gaye, and thinking about an artist like that's like got a song like What's Going On that's just like on the one hand a beautiful piece of music, on the other hand like really sharply attacking a very particular political moment. And I'm like, Anderson .Paak is in a similar vein of like what's happening now, like an artist that's speaking like 100% dead on target directly to social issues that are facing us, but also musically is still just something you want. Like it still is like a party song.
What's it? Was it something old you're listening to?
Oh yeah, this is an old one even within our timeline. But I listened to all of Gautier's, I guess, final record.
Oh yeah,
Making Mirrors. It's really cool. The art is actually a painting that his dad made. It's this
wow.
like really like cool
like
geometric
that weird,
thing.
yeah.
It's like a painting that his dad made. And the record it's a really beautiful record to me. It's almost like this weird kind of spaceship of a record and a cultural product, because it's got a #1 Billboard charting banger mega hit song on it, and then a bunch of weirdo art tracks. Even something like Pet Sounds is one of the only other things I can think of, or maybe even like Channel Orange, like these weirdo art albums that have like one song that does super duper well, and then everything else is just kind of like off the rails. Like you don't get that often. And I think there's something.
Somebody I used to know is a weird song.
Yeah, even it was weird for pop.
Yeah.
It's not like, you know, mainstream pop by any stretch. It like broke the mold. But even within the universe of the album Making Mirrors, it is the most down the middle pop. Like everything else on that song, it's got like Motown influences. Some of these songs are like 6 minutes long. Really weird use of like vocoders and speech boxes. Like, and yeah, his a lot of these songs are like really upbeat and like super major key, like funk soul influence. And there's like brass parts and slide guitars. but there's also like these really like washed out like experimental sections where it's just like psychedelic like reverb throws. Like it's an art record. It won the Grammy that year for best alternative album. It was one of those records that really like made my brain really start to get into production. Like there's certain songs that just had really interesting drum patterns and electric pianos, and I think that there's something about that album that's like really formative to how my brain likes to put music together. So it, like with anything like that, it was really cool to revisit it now that my brain is at the level of maturity that's currently at, to sort of approach something like that with a different lens and be like, whoa, I hear this totally differently than I did when I was 15. And I'm taking new things from it. And I absolutely love that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like somebody I used to know, I like listened to it and then called it.
But that's pretty much everyone's experience. Like no one knows anything else off that record.
But you
and I think
introduced
that's
me
amazing.
to the record, which and I don't necessarily love any of the songs on the record as much as I love Somebody I Used to Know. But it's so interesting that he made this whole record, and then one song called it,
pieced it, and then like left. Just left, was just like, yeah.
May we all make one great thing and go.
He didn't even monetize the YouTube video. He's like, the quote in the one interview off of that was, "I don't want to sell my music."
Oh boy,
like that's the thing that really gets to me about it. Is it's like, because I mean, obviously we're in a position, and so many of our peers are in a position where we're like chasing, like we want a Billboard #1 hit.
Right.
Like we want to write a song that captures the public consciousness and becomes part of the zeitgeist. Like that is a goal that we're working towards. There's days like where we're in the training montage of putting together the skill set that'll get us to that goal. And then there's someone who didn't even want that and got it anyway. And I think that's fascinating.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I feel like music is one of the few things where I mean, other than like being a viral TikTok or whatever, right. I feel like music is like one of the only mediums where that could accidentally happen. Because you don't see like a filmmaker,
right,
spending thousands of dollars to like not have a hit movie.
Right.
You don't see sort of that level of like modesty in other mediums necessarily. I guess maybe painters.
Yeah.
Or like, but I mean, studios cost money. I think about that song in Sunday in the Park with George, Putting It Together.
Yeah.
That Barbara Streisand also covers.
Right.
And her cover, she says, whenever I start to get defensive, I remember vinyl's expensive. I mean, that's the thing. Great. Is like, whenever you want to be like artistic or whatever, like, art isn't easy, even when you're hot. Advancing art is easy. Financing it is not.
Oh,
yeah.
That's so Sondheim. I love that.
I appreciate that so much. So I guess my
what's your new?
I like just heard it today. But Holly Humberstone has a song called Overkill.
Oh, yeah, you showed me that.
And she has 3 songs out. I think she went on tour with Louis Capaldi, but she's crazy good.
Yeah,
and the writing is great. And I feel like post Phoebe Bridgers, there was a lot of people that like were trying to sort of fill that kind of space or try to like enter the room that she sort of opened that door for. But I feel like too many artists I've heard have tried too hard to just be Phoebe Bridgers. And what's so interesting is that I feel like Holly Humberstone exists in her own space, but also exists in this sort of like world as well of like more organic based.
Yeah, like the Claro, like indie.
Yeah, but without the sort of electronic element,
it's very like band in a room feeling, which is really cool.
And the writing's beautiful. And her voice is so good. And the layers, like the vocal layers is so good.
Yeah.
So I'm a new fan, but I definitely am going to be listening to that on repeat. That, and I guess newly acquainted with Brendan Urie's cover of Into the Unknown.
Oh man, what a ripper.
And we'll talk about that later.
What a ripper. Yeah, we'll get to that.
But that definitely, that's definitely been on rotation for sure. It came out in January, but a friend of mine showed me Dan Campbell's cover of All Too Well by Taylor Swift.
Oh yeah.
And I live and die by a good pop punk cover of a pop song. I'm not crazy about most of Taylor Swift's music. I've said it before and I'll say it again. It doesn't do it for me necessarily. I just don't love her voice.
That's fair.
It happens,
Yeah, that's kind of like the whole thing.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, like with Taylor Swift, at least you can be like, well, what about her writing? Because like some of her songs
there's some really beautiful writing
well.
in Taylor Swift songs. And I feel like what I didn't realize until hearing Dan Campbell's cover is that what I feel like Taylor Swift songs suggest that I like miss is like the busker going in on a song. Like I miss like...
Yeah, your music is very sterile.
It's clean.
Yeah.
But there's an anger
to that song.
Yeah, that song is
and
I feel
gnarly.
like Taylor Swift's like brand of anger is like the Reputation era. Like that's her being angry. But I feel like there's something to be said about like a song like All Too Well.
Yeah.
That's so bitter. And so, because it's a very accusatory song. It's like this thing was a masterpiece before you tore it all up.
Right.
That's what she sings. And so, Dan Campbell going in and being like screaming, this thing was a masterpiece before you fucked it all up. Like you feel that and you get chills. And I feel like if she went in the way that like Julian Baker or like Phoebe Bridgers goes in on songs, I would definitely have connected with it, the original more.
Right.
And so I'm happy to hear this kind of like pop punk cover.
Love a good cover.
Though I'm always here for a good pop punk cover of anything, truly. So that's my old. I think we're moving on to movies.
Ooh.
So the first that we saw was based on Russell's suggestion, though it was on our list as well. To Five Bloods by Spike Lee. An incredible film.
Great film.
Really, really beautiful. I loved how they used that a cappella of Marvin Gaye.
Yeah, that was really powerful.
And it was a history lesson. I mean, I learned things about, I didn't even, and there's been a big conversation happening in America about just how much we've been failed as far as educated, like the education system teaching us about the mistreatment of Black Americans. But this really shows it, like in a very visceral way, how unfair the Vietnam War was. Not just to Vietnam.
Yeah, because we talk a lot about how unfair and fucked up Vietnam was, but like generally, but it was specifically really bad for Black people.
But the ratio, like the fact that I forgot the exact percentage, but the fact that there was a disproportionate number of Black people on the front line in Vietnam, and you see the PTSD, and you see like you don't even realize how recent, I guess, Vietnam was. That's what really hit me, is that like all the characters are not necessarily old people, and you just sort of see this trauma. You see this generational trauma. You see I think, and it was
the trauma of a war on all the nations involved. Like they really explore the trauma on America, but they also explore the trauma on the Vietnamese people and the entitlement they felt entitled. Well, not to get too far into the.
Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July.
Maybe that's your spoiler alert. Maybe.
Yeah. It was without spoiling anything in the movie. They delve into the effect of the generational trauma on the Vietnamese people and what that drives people to do there, as well as America, and the tension there, and also the tension of colonialism, of like French colonialism in Vietnam. Like the movie, like very neatly ties together a lot of like really complex themes and
with really intense moments and really beautiful moments too.
And it's like entertaining and compelling throughout. Like it's just a masterfully put together movie. I really strongly recommend it. But it's harrowing. It really sits with you. I feel like there are scenes that kind of replayed in my head throughout, and I'm happy to have learned. I mean, I feel like Spike Lee has always been really good about sort of having his films be these lessons almost. Yeah, especially now. It is just so fascinating how like little I actually really knew about Vietnam. Yeah. And how history is not history. Like I think we get a certain comfort in putting history in the past. Yeah. Like history is sort of something outside of us as opposed to something that just kind of happened. But yeah, there's those clips in the beginning about like here are a bunch of people in the street protesting what the American government is doing. There's a bunch of people in the street protesting racism and police brutality. And it's like this is it's like there's direct parallels to these old school news clips that were being shown and like actual news footage from our current everyday life, and like drawing those parallels is really powerful.
I hate to use this as a segue, but we also saw Frozen 2, which has a shockingly similar theme.
Exactly. I think there's something to be talked about.
And
here.
I don't necessarily mean to sort of put filmically and The Five Bloods, which is like a Spike Lee joint, next to Disney's flagship sequel.
Right.
Because I feel from a corporate level, very different motivations. But there is something interesting thematically about how Frozen 2 talks about generational wrongs. Yeah. And how and what it means to correct those wrongs and do right by and correct the wrongs of your ancestors in a sense.
Yeah, I think that's huge.
Also, the music's great.
The music is so good. The music is
into the unknown. Into the unknown. Into the unknown. for doing that one with me.
Yeah. I had to do it.
I didn't like the first Frozen movie. I didn't think it necessarily did anything for me on an emotional.
Yeah, as it did. I watched it. I was like, that was a Disney movie.
Yeah.
I think I watched it, and probably not on a plane, but I think I watched it. Like, I didn't see it in theaters. I just like saw it to see it, and I'm like, that was Frozen.
Last night we did a Campbellian breakdown of how in the first movie Elsa is the protagonist and Anna's the antagonist, because Elsa she needs to change, and that change and that flaw is that she isolates herself, and Anna brings about that change by trying to get her to build a snowman,
right?
And eventually, leave her ice castle. But in the second movie, Anna is the protagonist, Elsa's the antagonist.
Yeah,
because Anna needs to change because she's obsessed with her sister and everybody around her's well-being and doesn't take care of herself and see, what's permanent around her. And Elsa wants impermanence. She wants to venture into the unknown. And so she pushes that change for Anna.
Yeah.
And I think that's very compelling.
It's slick
from a Campbellian standpoint.
If there's anyone who knows how to throw a good Campbellian story together, it's Disney. And I think there's a reason Disney bought Star Wars. It's like
they love their monomyths.
Disney loves their monomyths. But that's the thing. I think the thing that struck me about Frozen 2 was, like, Frozen 1 had like a villain. Like, here's the person who we're supposed, and it had the classic Disney twist villain. But at this point, like, you kind of expect a twist villain from Disney. If there's a character who's like just a little too slick, you're like, all right, they're gonna be around the third act. You're gonna turn around and be like, bah, bah, bah,
Is love an open door?
It was my evil plan all along. But like, what's really, really compelling to me about Frozen 2 is that there is no like twirling mustache villain. The villain is the spirits of nature, which we can talk about that one, and the fact that Elsa and Anna's parents or grandfather did a bad thing. And I think there's something. It really. I think that your segue was apropos. I think there's something that really struck me about a corporation on the level of Disney telling a story of like, hey,
correcting the past.
Your ancestors did a bad thing, and it is your responsibility. Like, if you have the ability to right the wrong of a bad thing that someone in your family might have done, like that is a noble and admirable thing to do. And I think like that's a powerful message to send to children in a movie with like a lot of slapstick comedy and just like some fun music. I think that if you peel back the layers of it, there's actually a really powerful.
Though I mean, take Olaf's song. Like, this will all make sense when I get older.
Right.
Like, this is not necessarily like as specifically geared towards children, I feel, as like the first movie was.
Yeah, that's also very true.
I think in a sense they probably heard from a lot of parents, like, we've listened to Let It Go 18 times this week. Can you please make something that is like a little bit more maybe mature or whatever? And so there's that song.
I think the humor of like having Christoph's song be like an 80s power ballad, in the style of Whitesnake, like that's not a joke for little Timmy and Susie. Like, that's a joke for the dads.
Little Timmy and Susie, are those your kids?
Those are my children specifically. Shout out to little Timmy and Susie.
Little Timmy and Susie. What's the last photo that's on your camera roll?
Oh, what is the last photo on my camera roll? A picture of the TV screen as we watch The Floor is Lava on Netflix.
Oh, I suppose of all the TV shows that we can talk about, that's the big one. Is we really went in on The Floor is Lava this week.
Or actually, to be super correct about it, Floor is Lava.
Oh,
because the show is confoundingly not called The Floor is Lava.
It's just called Floor is Lava.
Which, oof.
My last photo, I was biking around yesterday and I saw one of the weirdest car accidents I think I've ever seen, because this guy hits a parked car parked in like a parked car lane. Like, he had to have gone out of the traffic lane of moving cars and sped into the parking lane.
Right.
And hit this truck with such force that A, the back of the truck was dripping oil. B, the truck itself was pushed forward into the back bumper of the Mercedes in front of it. Call back to it, my song.
Right.
And C, the guy's car, his front bumper, flew off of his car and landed parallel, but like next to the truck's driver's seat.
That's intense.
And so my photo is of this 3-car fuckery, and the guy who inexplicably managed to slam a parked car carrying his front bumper.
Oh my God.
So that's my last photo.
I like that. That's great.
Now, what's the high and low of your week?
Ooh, what is the high and low of my week? I would say the high was probably the other night when we were at the end of a nice group hang, and our dear friend Max threw the gauntlet of how about we all sit down and in a couple of minutes write a poem about how we're feeling in the moment. I think that's such a nice gesture of friendship and the kind of energy that I want more of in my life. And we all, threw on a beat and whipped out our notes app and wrote little poems, and we read them to each other and cheered each other on. And I think there was just something so delightful about that moment. And it really affirmed like my sense of belonging in a peer group of people who have similar interests and, bring out the best qualities in me. And I hope I bring out the best qualities in them. That was a highlight of my week for sure.
I just love that they've been really supportive of just like everybody's creativity, and so like, we mentioned that we like poetry, and we've shared some poems. And so the sort of logical thing, but like try to find a group that just like does this, like 1 a.m, we're writing poetry, and we're sharing poetry, and you're a great fucking poet. Like
well, I'm right back at you, bud.
Hey, I appreciate it. But yeah, it's just a really, really cool. It was really cool. And also just how different everybody writes.
Yeah.
4 people in the room all given one prompt. It's so interesting to see how everybody approaches it differently.
I've always been fascinated by that.
It was always, it was essentially the same sort of vibe, but very different poems. My high was adjacent to that, because that's definitely there. But we also, despite being in our early 20s, had a very intense game of Ninja.
Oh yeah.
Otherwise known as Kung Fu. Somewhat of an insensitive name for a playground game, but for those who don't know, it's a very intense kind of like, you can look it up, like a very intense kind of game. And I didn't realize that like my elementary school experience had all of us playing on like a crazy level until I was playing with you guys. And like, I felt like Superman. Like I was, normal on Krypton, but like crazy over. So I kind of, I think, wrecked you guys.
You kind of did. You just liked it because you won a bunch.
I felt so good. How many physical activities do you think I can like actually beat anybody at? That was definitely fun. What was your low?
I mean, I feel like I have an obvious low that I don't want to get into too much detail on the podcast. I think I was this week has confronted me with some very classic adult conundrums of letting go of things in your life that don't serve you anymore, and coming to terms with your past, and forgiving yourself for things you might have done wrong, forgiving other people for things they might have done wrong, and just acknowledging that things change and people change, and our lives go through many different phases. And I'm currently in one of sadness and loss, and starkly entering into that mindset has been hard on me, especially the last couple of days. But also, despite it being a low, I think it's also been really illuminating, as lows often tend to be. And I've even just in the little bit of digging that I've had to do in the last couple of days, I've learned a lot about myself and had a lot of really good conversations with friends and family and my therapist. And I think that's all you can really hope for. I
feel like from those experiences, you always learn something from that, which, nobody wants to experience loss again or whatever. But like, if you're, now you know more about yourself. So, as you live and you gain and you lose, whatever, you're more equipped.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of you for how you've gone through all of it.
I appreciate it. What's your low?
Oh, my low? Oh boy. Well, so Wednesday, you and I woke up somewhat early, and I had trouble sleeping the night before because I was really nervous about it, but I was supposed to get an endoscopy, and I'd never had anesthesia before, so I was really nervous about that. I was worried about what they would discover or anything. And I arrived there, and after waiting for an hour, I was told that the procedure, which I thought my insurance was going to cover, was actually not covered by my insurance, and I would have to pay anywhere in the ballpark of $500 to $1,000. They don't know. They were like, we don't know how much this will cost, because we could find something and we could have to send it to a lab, and that could cost an additional $900. We don't know, but it's happened. But we don't know, but it's happened.
Right.
But you have to make this decision now. Oh, and also you haven't slept last night and you haven't eaten for 12 hours or whatever. And it was crazy to me, especially because like 2 days before I'd paid a pretty solid amount for my insurance that was supposed to cover it.
Right.
And they said, and when I asked like why, because what I was aware of was that my insurance, without having to pay out of pocket and without having to deal with deductibles or whatever, would pay for preventative care.
Right.
And an endoscopy strikes me as preventative because if I notice anything in this endoscopy, I am preventing cancer or some shit, right? Or preventing complications of Crohn's or colitis or whatever. But turns out it's diagnostic,
Right.
which strikes me as a big semantic hangup to have a financial difference in.
That's how they get you.
Diagnostics are a whole nother financial side of insurance
versus screenings.
than preventative screenings.
Right.
But again, I'm like, well, what if hypothetically you go, you put me under, you go in, you don't find anything, and we screened and you didn't find anything. They said that would technically be considered preventative care. But if we do find something, it's diagnostic. So you have to pay. And we have to, they're like, most likely we will find something.
Right.
There's a 98% chance we will find something that we have to test.
Right.
I'm like, well, what if you just don't? Like, what if you see it and you're like, nah? They're like, we legally can't do that because it's failure to diagnose. I'm like, but I consent to not being diagnosed.
Right.
So I don't have to pay for it.
Oh, man.
And you got to question, like, Hippocratic oath, like, do no harm. Do no harm to what? My psyche is fucked right now.
Right.
No, but she's like, do you want to talk to your doctor? I'm like, he's here? She's like, of course he's here. I'm like, I talked to him in a different office last time. I guess he's just around. So he comes out and he's like, I understand the finances of this procedure is troubling you. I'm like, yeah, I definitely have some qualms about suddenly realizing I have to maybe pay. I don't know how much.
Right.
And he goes, well, we do have an appointment where we just talk about how your stomach's doing, how your medication is working with your stomach. I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling okay. He's like, well, I'm really happy to hear that you're feeling okay, and we can figure out what works and what doesn't. But I think overall, if you don't want to do this, you don't need to do this. I'm like, you're telling me I could have just fucking dropped $1,000, something I didn't need to do?
Right. That's fun.
I love American healthcare. I pay for insurance. I don't understand.
Yeah, why do you pay for insurance? This is how it's going to end up.
I like to think I'm a somewhat intelligent person, and I feel like when something doesn't make sense, it's not me.
Right.
Like, I want to at least be able to like get to the point where if something doesn't make sense, it's not me not understanding it. It's the fucking thing being broken. And that was my low.
Right. No, I get that. I respect it.
Well, thank you for coming along on that journey. Because I feel like you clearly hear that I needed to just sort of get that out of my system.
Are you good now? I felt like
it was cathartic.
It felt cathartic.
It felt good. I guess last but not least, what are you looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to? Ooh.
We had some songs coming out. Worth plugging that. Tendencies is out now, and Balance is out. Our Transviolent Money Money remix is out. And what's nice about that remix is that we are donating half of what we earn from that remix to great causes like the ACLU and to NAMI, which is a mental health organization. And we have We're Fine, which took us 5 years to write, on the horizon.
It's coming out.
So there's songs. But I want to know sort of more personally, like what you're looking forward to.
What am I looking forward to? It's always a tough question in these harrowing Corona times. I'm looking forward to the 4th of July. We've got some nice low-key COVID-safe plans for the 4th of July with our quarantine group. I'm looking forward to just switching up the pace and we're going on a hike tomorrow. And I've been wanting to go on a hike for a while, and I haven't found the gumption to do it myself. So that's really all I need in this life is just the promise of going to see a rock and a tree in a day. That's really fills me with nothing but joy.
I'm excited for the 4th of July, partially because this is the first 4th of July that I'm experiencing with a Londoner.
Right.
So I'm making all of the American Revolution jokes I can.
Right. As one should.
As one does. This is the first 4th of July in like 8 years that I'm not in New York for. It just we sort of arbitrarily picked the 4th when like all of my friends would kind of come back to our hometown and we'd see our families and spend time together. I live like on the river, like on the Hudson River, and we would pile on my friend's roof every year and watch the fireworks over all the river towns reflected off of the Hudson River. I'm sad that I can't go home, and that it's been like 8 months since I've been back in New York to see my family. But if not that, I'm really happy that we're hiking and being amongst friends and at least sort of celebrating friendship in the same way that I feel like I've wanted this day to be.
Right.
I think I'm also looking forward to this folk project that I'm working on with Max.
Yeah.
I have a name for it. I think finally, I'm not going to say it now because I want to sit with it a little bit more, but like the more I think about it, the more it really resonates with me. And I'm writing poems, and you're writing poems too, but like I'm like writing poems, and I think I'm like actually getting close to having enough for like a book and potentially making sort of a companion album with like ambient stuff around it. So that's something that like has always kind of been like a back burner project. And it's interesting that like I've managed to get to like writing, a poem a week or a poem every 2 weeks. And that's been like a nice kind of discipline. So
that's great.
I'm excited about all that. Lots to look forward to, But as always, thank you to everybody who's tuned in and listened. Again, if you want to be a part of this, check us out on Patreon. That's patreon.com/talkinglion. We will be here, on Sunday talking with another artist, and we'll be here on Wednesdays talking to each other about movies, life, personal questions, and everything in between, Just two people on a podcast. You've never heard that before.
You've never heard that before.
But boy, do I have an outro for you. Ready for this?
Lay it on me.
You've never heard this as an outro before. Well, baby, I hear the blues are calling, tossed salads and scrambled eggs. Mercy. Maybe I seem a bit confused. Well, maybe, but I got you pegged. Because I don't know what to do with those tossed salads and scrambled eggs. They're calling again. Sleeping Lion has left the building.
We would like to thank Alan C. for supporting Talking Lion on Patreon and Isotope.